All right, so everybody, please welcome Rochelle Clark to the stage here. All right. Rochelle is one of the wonderful people that decided to stick around here this morning and have a good conversation with us, so thank you for doing that. She's the Senior Director for Advertising for Penguin Random House Books. And how long have you been doing that?
About 16 years.
16 years. You're an avid book reader.
I am, yes.
And is this like a passion job for you, basically?
Absolutely, yeah. I think you'll find that. Oh, sorry. There you go. You'll find that most folks in the book publishing industry get into it because they were English majors, and so there are a few things you can do with an English major besides teach or work in publishing. So
True. And also, when we did our first conversation online, most people have their background set up to be like a version of who they are, right? A lot of people put books and other paraphernalia behind them, but there's a good chance that when you see somebody with a background with books, that they haven't read them all, but you probably have read every one of those books that was behind you, and it's a full-on library.
quite a few, yes. My husband's also an English teacher, so between the two of us, we've probably read them all.
And you have kids?
A 4-year-old. So he has like 3 bookshelves in his room.
Okay, good. This is going to be the most well-read child in the history of the universe.
That's
okay.
the goal.
All right, so for the conversation today, it says here, it's not a bad conversation, meaning it's about books and audience and data. A little bit of play on words. But really, you are bringing all of this in-house. You're doing this in-house advertising movement for Penguin Random House. What led you to want to do that?
I just being a part of the company for a long time, I noticed the really siloed nature of our individual publishing divisions. We have 4 adult publishing divisions, 2 children's divisions, and an audio publishing division, and they all had their own separate marketing teams and advertising infrastructure. And because they're competitive amongst one another, they weren't really sharing best practices. They were using different agencies for the same channels, and it was extremely inefficient. And so we have a consumer marketing team that lives centrally, but the advertising was never a part of it. So in 2021, we started to centralize all of our advertising efforts in that consumer marketing team. So we, began to build the data infrastructure necessary, start to tap in and consolidate our large first-party data stores collectively, and begin resourcing centrally as well. So getting a lot of those best practices, condensing the number of agencies that we worked with, and working more strategically with the few that were shared amongst teams, and just even small things like standardizing naming conventions went a really, really long way in helping to build the reporting capabilities that we can draw from now in our centralized advertising structure.
Okay. And being a marketer, you're a marketer, making the decision to bring things in-house, how long did it take you to actually say, we're going to pull the trigger on this, and how much pre-selling did you have to do inside the organization to get everybody else on board?
It was a lot of education, a lot of hearts and minds tours, because everyone wanted to be closer to their own individual decision making. There's a sense of loss of control when it becomes centralized outside of their direct oversight. I mean, that agencies deal with that too, I'm sure. But each individual publishing team did not really want to mingle
Give up
amongst
control.
Again, mingle amongst the rest of their competitors in terms of strategy. And so it probably took a good 2 years of doing that before we had one team on board to kind of start it with us first. Mm-hmm. And then it's been like a 3-year journey so far to get to where we are.
When you brought that one group on board, you buy them, or excuse me, you sell them on the idea, they bought off on it, they come on board to work with you specifically to do it. Are the results that they see, is that the impetus to get everybody else to say, I'm willing to consider this now?
Yes, absolutely. It was one of our children's divisions that we started with, and then being able to kind of demonstrate in market, how well they were doing, and then kind of everyone else kind of started to take note and be a little bit more amenable to, testing, running some things through our team, and then everyone kind of wanted on board.
But at the end of it, what's the biggest metric that got them to say this was successful? Was it book sales, or was it some other leading indicator that you focus on?
I'd say there's 2. We really did increase the direct attributable return on ad spend from their advertising dollars. That was really helpful to demonstrate. But then also they just saw the efficiency on their end. Their title marketers were able to dedicate their time to a lot of other efforts and not necessarily spend so much time on the media strategy.
So you freed up resources for them
Yes.
too. So they probably very, very much enjoy.
Yes.
Okay. And what's interesting about your space, your category, which I hadn't thought about until we spoke, right? There's a bunch of other brands here. You know, you've got CPG type companies, and they have a product. They push that product all year long. You have new release after new release. It's like a completely new product launch every time a new book comes out, right?
Yeah, we publish 16,000 new titles a year. So that's like 700 million titles sold across physical, audio each year. And we publish everything from like Dr. Seuss to John Grisham to Martha Stewart to Amanda Gorman to George R.R. Martin. So it's really runs the gamut. And there are hundreds of titles going on sale every Tuesday. So we are in a different stage of a title's life cycle at all times. The on sale date, the launch of a title is obviously the most important milestone that we form most of our campaigns around. Most budget is spent, during those first 2 weeks when the authors are touring, when the books are front of store in brick and mortar, and we have the most opportunity to drive discoverability and continue momentum. So we're launching books every single week, and at the same time we're trying to continue sales for other books. We're capitalizing on seasonal moments and on trends, like the book talk effect is so real. We have to be available to adapt and to support titles that are meeting cultural moments or trends. So just constantly nurturing thousands of titles.
And so the assumption with that part of what your strategy is that you rely heavily on the data, both from a upfront targetability perspective, to be able to find the right audiences, to be able to go deliver these books to and announce these books to. But you have probably a stream of data coming in that tells you how these books are performing against certain types of audiences, how they stack up against other books. So what's the system look like to be able to take advantage of all those data streams?
Yeah, so we've built a centralized ad reporting database within our team that allows us to report by channel, by audience, our like different first-party audience segments, our reader personas, pull reports by author, by genre, by series, and that helps us to plan like the channels that we're going to launch for a title, and then to focus on the audiences that we're going to go after for each individual title. But that's really just the starting point in terms of planning each title, even though it might share similar qualities or be in a particular genre. We have to consider like the author's profile. Are they a brand author, or are they a debut author? Do they have a following on social media? And so there are layers of individuality for each campaign, but in flight for any campaign, we are using that same database to monitor in real time full funnel performance, reallocate our budget across channels, and then we use the same tool to report on performance to our stakeholders.
Okay. And how much of, I mean, you kind of allude to it, but how much of the plan for a new book title release, whether it's coming from an established author or it's coming from a new author, how much of that is brand new thinking and brand new strategy versus going back and looking at models for other books and other titles you've done in the past?
I'd say maybe 75% just by necessity because of our scale is kind of going to not necessarily templates, but just channels or audiences that we know work well. Yes. And then about 25% is new, and I'd say that it varies by category. Like there are certain, like fiction is like historical fiction specifically is like readers tend to go back to that category over and over, like science fiction, romance as well. Like so they might share a more similar playbook, whereas some nonfiction categories, there are more distinctions between like a Southern cookbook, a very specific like city cookbook, other sort of like regional cookbooks that take into consideration dietary restrictions. So we can't necessarily rely on playbooks as closely for things that are more individual, more prescriptive, lifestyle, a lot of nonfiction, a lot more individuality in those campaigns.
Got it. And then the conversation the last couple of days, there's a couple really interesting things that had come out of it that I hadn't really anticipated, but one of them was how the balance has shifted maybe back towards doing more contextual types of advertising, away from being purely programmatic and doing data from an audience targeting perspective, but using data as a tool to figure out how you identify partners for a more contextual strategy. I also know that you were talking about ways to evolve the overall marketing and media strategies for the books and the titles. So Are you looking at things in the same way? Are you looking at more contextual? Are you looking at other channels now that use data, like digital out of home? How is your strategy progressing and evolving now?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's definitely top of mind for us as we're expanding and building our team. We are definitely taking contextual signals into account when it comes to like readers' need states. You know, from an audience perspective, like looking at myself, I might be like a mother, but I might want I might be more receptive to an ad about like books for my child at certain times of day versus books for myself. You know, so taking like what they're reading, what are they necessarily in market for, but we are looking at partners for their own. I'd say we're looking at new ad partners for their own data. So not necessarily context, but I'm thinking of like I'm going to say New York Times, but that's like a very very common partner for us. But we know that they have a really strong store of first party data, and they can directly target readers. They can directly target fans of political science, and we would be leveraging that data directly in the context of they're on that platform to learn, to read, similar to why they might pick up a book. But if we also want to reach fans of literature, fans of political science, as they're browsing the web, like we will obviously like look for a data partner, not necessarily like a publishing partner. But we're expanding our by investing in our media buying team. We're able to kind of do both things at once. We've been kind of a lot more reliant on walled gardens, on like using our own first party data and the platforms that allow us to do that. But we're hoping to be able to expand and rely more on partnerships soon.
And are you looking at other things like you were talking with Lyle this morning, and Lyle was talking yesterday about different things like let's use data to find a tangential audience like anime users or anime watchers. Do you use that in some of the planning for the books and titles as well? Like say, hey, science fiction also aligns really well with, I don't know, baking. And we're going to talk to people in a baking environment. That's not the right example, but it's Saturday.
Thinking of baking, I think that we do. We have a really great consumer insights team that we work in partnership with that has helped us to develop these reader personas and what readers of particular genres might be, like what media affinities they might have, and we use that a lot in our planning. And I'd say particularly for the audiobook channel, we look at I'd say like niche behaviors, like cooking, like exercising, like knitting, things that they might do while they're listening to audiobooks. And so I'd say that targeting like behaviors is especially important in that format because you can do more things at once. Whereas like when we're looking at similar interests for like physical books, I'd say like film is a really good comp. If you're a fan of like science fiction movies, TV, you might also be fans of science fiction books, romance content, like drama, television as well.
And then to change direction a little bit, let's talk about the sort of elephant in the room, which would be an Amazon. Amazon, obviously, you sell a lot through Amazon, and they have the retail media network. Is that just an rapidly expanding channel for you and for all the titles that you push?
Amazon is an extremely valuable partner. They're our largest like customer as well as being a really valuable advertising partner. They, I'd say, if they're expanding like with us, it's because they are they're proving out their worth. Like if we are gaining profitability from our advertising with Amazon, then our business with them can grow, but it's not necessarily, I'd say, taking from any other channel or taking from any other partnership. We're kind of looking to grow each respective partnership in its own right, and if we are able to justify growth in each space in and of its own right, that's what we're looking to do. But we don't really see our mix shifting too heavily toward Amazon because when our goal is to drive sales with that particular partner, obviously we're going to go to Amazon heavily, but we have a lot of other goals to drive business to our the brick and mortar stores, to all of our other online partnerships to support independent booksellers, and obviously in the audio space as well with other partners like Spotify being a retailer now.
Right. And you have the in-house ad team. Do you ever get those calls from the in-house retail team saying, hey, I need you to go spend more money with these people because it's going to help my deal to help them push our titles?
Luckily, we don't get those calls directly, but our sales team absolutely does, and we get our calls from the sales team.
How do you handle that?
It's a really important partnership. I think that, like, obviously we want to help drive their goals overall. So if there are things that we can do to support them, we absolutely will. But we also have to make sure that we're balancing. Performance like on our side of the channel, and take into consideration the benefits that they are getting from any contributions that we might make.
So let's go back for a second to the mix, the media mix that you look at, and how data influences those top, middle, bottom of funnel. What does the strategy look like generally for pushing out titles, especially the volume of titles you have on a regular basis?
I'd say we really have to look at the each individual book is really different. I'd say our strategy at the top of the funnel has to be entirely different for like a book from Danielle Steele, who is a household name. We don't really have to do as much awareness building for her. We can just tell folks that a new Danielle Steele book is out, and they get the gist. But if this is a brand new author, we have to establish like what the content might be, what their voice might be, find their readership, and contextualize the plot a little bit more. So there's a lot more work to be done at the top of the funnel. Similarly, for some of our like more prescriptive titles, you might have to like explain a little bit more the philosophy behind that self-help book, or a little bit more about the specific approach to a cuisine. So there's a lot more contextualizing that needs to be done. So that might inform the ad types that we use. Something more native, something more long form, and just again, if it's a new Bluey picture book, you don't really have to do a lot of explaining there. The imagery can kind of sell itself, so that really informs how much we have to dedicate in each respective part of the funnel.
But you can't manage all these individual titles. So let's say it's top of funnel. You mentioned when we talked, you use a lot with podcasts, CTV, out of home, print, etc. Do you then go set up a master deal with someone to say, I'm going to give you 1,000 titles this year, I'm going to give you 500 titles this year, and then you're going to allocate the weight of those titles based on the data that tells you how you should be allocating it?
We're hopefully starting to move in that direction for certain categories, but because we like the publishing cycle like certainly changes, and we don't necessarily have a view into next year into how many science fiction books might be published, or how many science fiction books we might need to continue to support from this year.
Because authors are unreliable?
No, not at all. Because like on sale dates might shift because of we find out that there's a competitor launching that week, so we're going to push ours a month, or this book is ready early, so we're going to publish it earlier. So there are just a lot of changing factors, but like a big factor is the books that we need to continue to support. So being able to predict ahead of time that we will have 10 books to reach that specific audience, or we will have 20 books that are right for that channel is often hard. So we are kind of doing a little bit more on the fly than we'd like to, and maybe than is efficient. But we're trying to put some mechanisms in place to be able to set up some of more of those long-term deals that would be applicable across more titles.
Yeah, so more inbound data that's going to help you understand if this is performing well, this is not performing well, and also the external factors of maybe, is this being turned into a movie? Is this being turned into a TV show?
So, it's really valuable to have partners that kind of allow for some of that flexibility, where it's like this might be set up as a minimum over a certain amount of time, or like a certain amount, being able to segment a campaign into multiple different flights because of the nature of our work. So the flexibility with partners is really helpful.
Is there any campaign that you can think of off the top of your head that you're really especially proud of, and it's something that maybe you wouldn't have been able to do if you hadn't in-house the advertising?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd say for the Aragon series, Murtaugh, the children's book, the Murtaugh, the new installment in the series came out earlier this year, and we were able to work really, really closely with that title marketing team to kind of build like a year-long campaign, like pre-order, kind of building excitement ahead of the release. And really work on even driving demand for previous books in the series, and kind of keep that momentum going. Like the book is still doing really, really well. being a part of that entire planning process was really helpful, and that's something like they likely would not have had like an agency who they might have worked with previously get as close to the planning process as we were able to do being in-house. So I think that turned out to be a really special and successful campaign.
We are going to go to the audience to questions 1 second, but I have one more question that you and I talked about, and we promised we would actually talk about it, which is you have this passion about making sure that the books that people should be able to read are available to them.
Yes.
And that people aren't going out and banning books.
Yes.
So talk about it.
Yes, ban books. That's something that Penguin Random House, as a corporation, is really concerned about right now. I'm really passionate about. I mean, having books available for people in their public libraries, on the shelves of their local bookstores, in their schools, is obviously like wonderful for business. But like that's like 0% of why I really care about it. It's really just like the ability of folks to see like their voice represented in stories, and when in the situations in particular areas when they don't have that, like I think it's really cool that we're able to like leverage data to get books in front of them. Where Penguin Random House is giving away a lot of books in areas that have been affected by book bans, and because we cannot be everywhere to do that, we're able to like push our giveaways in those areas by targeting folks who have expressed interest in books by marginalized voices, or who live in areas that are mostly impacted by book bans. So being able to like leverage our consumer data for good is something that I'm really excited about.
And being able to utilize a channel of digital books, because if you can't get a physical book to somebody, you can always get them the digital version, and everybody has a phone these days, and it's important. Like I know this is not a politic-y thing, but it is a kind of politic-y thing. You should be able to read somebody else's point of view on topics that maybe you don't have firsthand knowledge on. It's important.
Yeah, I mean, we publish both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, so it's like we want to get all books in front of
Put
everyone.
them on the stand next to each other and see what happens. No, just
Some bookstores might.
yeah, they might, just for fun. All right, any questions for the audience for Rochelle?
Any questions?
Got a couple right off the bat.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Jesse. I work for Wavemaker. I was interested to know, do you ever have a big author that decides they want to participate in the strategy? You just mentioned like Harris and Trump. Do you have to like work with their teams maybe, and how much impact can they have? And I'm also wondering if they have maybe like a big social media following, or they sell maybe through their own means. I'm not sure if that's allowed, but maybe they have their own data that they want to use. So what does that conversation look like? And then I'm also curious about like live tours. How does that conversation work, if you can weave that in?
Yeah, my team does not handle the publicity department handles the tours and things like that, but we absolutely have to account for whether or not there's a large tour involved, because that's in a situation where we can support events in local markets, like with targeted ads, or we sometimes like run direct ads to elicit event attendance. And author involvement is very, very huge. It's a really, really big part of our campaigns. I didn't bring it up as much here because it is so involved on the social front, but we absolutely try to leverage as much of an author's own social presence as possible. Like them speaking directly to their readership is the most impactful way to reach their audience and to sell books. So if we can leverage their social presence, we absolutely will. And we do have to do some coordinating with author teams. A lot of authors and their agents require like approval of like every single asset that we put out. Especially if their face is on the ads. We absolutely respect that, and the way that we're positioning like what's often like their life's work. Like we have to run everything, strategy, assets, all by them. So very involved.
Hi, Rochelle. This is Harrison from AdTheorent. I have a very hard-hitting marketing question for you.
Oh, lay it on me.
What is your favorite book and why?
Oh, that's a good one.
All right, that's a Saturday morning question.
All-time favorite. I kind of think of it like a desert island book, like something that I could read mostly because it'll take me a really, really long time. I'm a really big fan of James Joyce's Ulysses. But I'd say recent book, just finished James by Percival Everett. If anyone's like read Huckleberry Finn, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, it's like a retelling of that book, and it's really fantastic. Thank you for that question.
Anyone else?
What other questions do we have?
All right. Well, this is awesome. Thank you, Rochelle.
Before we get off, Emily, camera, we have to do a mic drop picture with Rochelle.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
We're
we have
doing
to
a
do
mic drop.
So everybody, Just give her the 1 second. I want a loud round of applause for how she mic drops it, and we get a picture of this because Seth loves his MediaPost pictures, and he likes to see the crazier ones afterwards. So we'll put it on the ground. You're gonna fake the mic drop. Don't actually drop them. Yeah, because it costs too much money. Those cost too much money. So you're gonna put your face out there and be like, "Yeah, bitches, that was the best one I've done all day," and I'm gonna be like, "All right." So let's go ahead, get a good picture. Ready? Go for it. All right, that's all we needed.
Thanks, Rochelle and Cory.